Okay, let's talk about creating and managing indexes in SQL Server. Now we use indexes to make it easier to find data. It'll speed up queries and other processes that we run. Now some indexes, yeah, you know what? We're going to wait for a second. We're going to dive into what we've got first. So I'm going to explore this AdventureWorks database. And I want to look up my tables. And then for each table, if I expand the table, let me expand. Oh, let's do customer address here. I'm going to see indexes. Now, an index that's typically going to be created immediately is going to be the primary key index. So we can see that right here. Primary key customer address is based on the primary key, customer address, customer ID, and address ID is the name of it. So I'm going to double click on this and it should open it up and it's going to show me my index information here. Okay, so we can see that it is built on, and by the way, I have limited options to deal with this because it's primary key. But you can see we're using customer address or customer ID and address ID as our primary key index. If I go to the options, I want you to see a couple of things here. Allow recompute statistics. Now, statistics are going to be tracked by the SQL server to keep track of how well these perform. And we can use that. We don't use that. The SQL engine will use that when it is coming up with execution plans for our queries. We're going to talk about that in a subsequent video. But what I want you to see here is that this will show us what our indexes consists of, the options that are available, whether we are allowing it to track statistics on this. And then the other thing we need to be aware of is our fragmentation. So our fragmentation level, you can see page fullness 86.9%, total fragmentation 50%. If fragmentation gets too high, we need to manage that. Now I'm going to do this. I'm going to create a new index here just to give me something to play with. So I'm going to right click and create a new index, and I can choose a clustered index, a non-clustered index, XML data, spatial index, clustered column store, non-clustered column store. I'm going to include my non-clustered index. And by the way, this is going to be one that makes no sense, but I just want to show you how this functions. So the table name, customer address, the index name. So I'm going to call this a temp. We do temp dash index. Okay. And then I can specify if this is going to be unique or not with this little checkbox here, which means only unique values are allowed. Since it's not a primary key, I'm not going to worry about that. Now, what are my index key columns? What I'm going to index on. And so here I can choose what I want to index on. And I'm going to index on, let's do modified date. Like I said, this makes no sense, but that's okay. We're going to delete it here in a few minutes anyway. So it'll show me the column name, the data type, the size, whether it's an identity, whether we allow nulls or not. So I'm going to set a modified date. And then I can also choose to do included columns. Now, the index key columns, this is what we're going to index on. I can include other columns in that index. So, and for example, if I'm frequently going to pull up, say, customer's first and last name, then I might create an index on their customer ID and include first and last name. It won't be indexed on them, but in that case, if we're just pulling the first and last name based on the customer ID, then SQL can just pull that information from the index. It doesn't have to load or go back to the actual whole table. So that's why we can have some included columns here. All right, and then I can add more, and I can set my sort order or see my sort order, set it to ascending or descending. Okay, real quick, options. Do I want to allow us to compute statistics on that? Do I want to allow for row locks, page locks? And then that's what I need for the moment. So I'm going to hit OK, and I'm going to create an index. Now, if this index gets fragmented, which will happen over time, honestly, it's not going to happen until I've actually used this and added a bunch of data, deleted data, whatever. Done a bunch of work with this. I can go to my fragmentation and view my current level of fragmentation. If my fragmentation is out of control, then I can right click on my index and reorganize or rebuild. So I'm going to click on reorganize. Reorganize, it'll look at the total fragmentation percentage. You can see it right here. We can scroll over, see the status of the reorganization, whatever. Okay, reorganization will run in the background and will not disrupt people using my index. If I go to rebuild, which is a more dramatic approach, this one I can choose to allow online or offline. If I do it online, then people can continue to use the index while I rebuild it. If I do offline, then they cannot. Okay, and then hit OK, and it rebuilds my index. Now, I made a passing comment about statistics, right? Oh, let me real quick. I'm going to delete this because I don't need it. So I'm going to right click and delete my index. Okay. If I want to set database level options, so we saw how we could track statistics and performance on indexes. I can do the same thing for the database. I do that here. I right click on my database, go to properties, and under options, this right here is going to include, do we want to auto create statistics? Do we want to automatically update statistics? Do we want to update statistics asynchronously? So all of these, this by the way can be useful in a larger database. The other thing is, do I want to auto create incremental statistics, which is doing statistics on just part of that data or that index. So all of these settings I can adjust here. The asynchronously, the incremental statistics, something I might do in a much larger database. But we always want to make sure that we are auto creating and auto updating statistics. Otherwise, our statistics will get out of date and they'll no longer be valid for SQL working on our execution plans. Okay, that is how we can create and manage statistics. Figuring out which, let me try that again, create and manage indexes. Figuring out which indexes to create, that can sometimes be a little bit more challenging because we don't just want to create indexes out of the blue, because we can end up storing a bunch more data because our indexes have to be stored. We can end up spending so much time managing our indexes that it actually negatively impacts the performance of our database rather than improving the performance of our database, which statistics are supposed to do. So, how do we know which statistics to create? Well, there's a couple of different things we could do. Number one, we can kind of try to get a feel for it. So if we notice particular queries or workloads seem to be running longer and the system seems to be struggling under it more, then we can try to figure out what are we doing here and can we index this to make it better. However, there are a couple of tools that we can use, like the Database Engine Tuning Advisor and Query Execution Plans, that will actually give us a little more insight into that. And that is going to be the subject of our next video.